Hey everybody, and welcome to A Balanced Life with Dr. Jacquie here at Black Star Network. And let me tell you, today, we got something to talk about. We are going to be talking about the power of pivoting. I know it's hard. You can't pick yourself up. You don't know whether you're coming or going. You got too many voices in your head, people trying to tell you, do this, do that. But at the same time, we have some guests today who are going to give you some clarity, some direction, and the ability to say, I am capable of being able to pivot. I know it's not easy because most of you have said in years past that you do not like change, but it's a part of who we are and the life that we live. Today, we are going to be joined by Dr. Tierney, our level up coach, Katrina Smith, who is also a part of our balanced living coaching expert and educator. We're joined by family and life strategist, you know her, Charlotte Avery, also joined by Erin Bishop, community leader, author, and advocate. And our special guest today is Reverend Deborah Bell, who is not only a John Maxwell leadership coach, but she is also a career coach. And last but not least, we have Stacey Owens, author, educator, and all things get your business together. Hey, y'all.
Hey.
I am delighted that you all are here today. When we think about life and how it's lifing, when we think about all the things that we've heard these last several months, just getting into 2025, seems like our world has been turned upside down. And literally, people do not know whether they are coming and whether or not they are going. I want to jump right into our conversation today because over the past few months, we've heard a lot about our children who are being bullied, children who are taking their own lives, seemingly because people are talking in their households and other people have gotten the idea that it's okay to make other people feel bad about who they are. But how do we pivot, y'all? In your mind, in your heart, your soul, mentally, physically, spiritually, socially, emotionally, all the alleys. How do we pivot? I want to jump in with Charlotte Avery, our family life strategist, just to get some tips and tidbits about how do you transition the things that are going on, not only in your home, but with your kids at school, in college, middle school, high school. What does that look like when we're talking about how do we pivot our young?
That is such a great question. And thank you for having me today, Dr. Jacquie. So here's the thing, like when for me, so I have pivoted with my children in two ways. One, I pivoted with myself when I started to do more as far as growing my business and things of that nature. So what that looked like for me was there were some things that I used to do that I just said, you know what? I've trained them in the way that they should go. And now they're old enough to do certain things. So that meant that I no longer had to do certain things for them. Sometimes like making dinner all the time, washing clothes and things like that. The laundry is the devil. And so, you know, I let those responsibilities go to them. But when I pivoted and I started doing more for my business, which meant that I was still doing more for my family, but in a different way, then that meant that some responsibilities, excuse me, they now took on. So I wanted to say that because when you're a mom and you're trying to pivot your family, it also is a conversation that you have to have. Like you can't just go rogue and be like, oh, I'm going to stop making dinner every day, or I'm going to stop doing laundry. It's a conversation of pivoting because sometimes we don't do that. Sometimes we don't even communicate and have a conversation just in our minds. We talk to ourselves and we're like, oh, I'm doing this. But they're like, well, what happened? Like, why are you doing all this? And you didn't have a conversation. So sometimes when you're pivoting, you have to have a conversation about how you're pivoting and how that's going to impact your house. That's the first thing. The second thing is this. Because I have so many children, I have children in college, I have children in high school, middle school, and elementary school, and all of them are going through different phases of life. And so what I've tried to do is as my children have gone from elementary school to middle school and high school and college, I've had conversations with them about friend groups and how they manage those friend groups, because sometimes we go into thinking, well, I'm going to have the same friends in middle school as I did in elementary school, only to realize that, oh my gosh, my same friend who used to be my bestie in elementary school or middle school, we're not even friends anymore in high school. And that can be really uncomfortable. And so when you have to pivot, and sometimes people no longer want to be your people, then you have to also teach your children about their own self-worth, so that when they pivot, they don't look at pivoting and changing friend groups and things like that as something really bad, but as a point of growth.
I like that what you said about a point of growth and having conversations. I want to invite Katrina and Stacy into this conversation, who occupy that education space. And I'm doing this because oftentimes what happens in the home doesn't translate to the school building. And oftentimes that communication with parent, that communication with school and home, there's a disconnect there. And so mom is saying, when you get to school, do this, this, and this. And the teacher is saying, why are you having all these changes? And no one's talking. Nobody's sharing, because our generation, we grew up with what happens in my house stays in my house. And so oftentimes communication is left, and teachers, educators, administrators, Stacy and Katrina, are trying to figure out how to manage that dynamic of what is happening at the home. And then how does it translate into, well, how do we support you? Because school is community. And oftentimes community gets left out of the conversation. Let me start with Katrina. Talk to us about that as the educator, retired administrator. Where are the disconnects and why do they happen?
Well, some of that disconnect is exactly what you said. We grew up in an era where what happens in our house stays in our house, and you don't go to school and tell that teacher our business. What we need to evolve to is that a three-pronged approach, right? Where the parent or the guardian is noticing changes and being a strong advocate for their child, and working with the school to make sure that the message and the situation is communicated to the proper person at the school. For example, your child may be going through a growth spurt. They've grown, they're larger than their other friends. They feel uncomfortable, uneasy. They don't have the same likes anymore. Instead of that child advocating, you as the parent make the phone call, have the conversation with the teacher, have the conversation with the administrator or the counselor, and say, we've noticed some changes. What are some recommendations that you can do for our child? Come up with a just a safety plan, but an emotional plan. Most time when parents think about things, they think we only run to the school when our kid gets in trouble. Run to the school when you notice changes. Develop that emotional support plan with your school so that they can help your child be successful while they're there.
Being successful while they are there is important. Stacy, talk to us about, you're in the building every day. You're running two schools. You've got a lot going on, parents, constituency, and your staff. So what does that look like in your day to day? And how do we engage parents and others in helping our children discover the power of pivoting?
See, from my perspective, I'm going to say that I'm in a pivot myself here at the schools that I run, because I think traditionally we have been taught to encourage parents to come in and share and tell us about your child and so forth. But when you have a group of parents in this day that are not comfortable sometimes doing that themselves, I have pivoted to teaching my staff to say, you have to know the client that you're serving, right? I tell my staff every day, you have to know your clientele. You have to know the students beyond the classroom. So I've put the responsibility on our teachers to say, in the relationship building phase, get to know your students, find out what their likes are, create surveys, talk to the students, have times where you are finding out who they are as a student, who they are at home. We take it from a cultural responsive perspective, where we're listening to, we want to know, what music you're listening to. We want to know your style of dress. We want to know you on a deeper level in terms of knowing what are your beliefs as a child as it relates to respect. What is your beliefs systems? What are your values? What are the things that you're experiencing at home? And then we bring our parents in. We don't wait for the parents to come in. We go after them and ask those same kind of questions, because in order to merge these two communities, I have to first understand, what background are you coming from? What culture are you bringing in this building, so that we can align ourselves to it and make sure that we are doing the things here to meet your need, and then you're understanding what we need from you, so that we're all speaking the same language. I think we have to start there as far as identity, identifying what's in the building, who's in the building, what are your core values, what are your beliefs, what do you see respect as? Let's define it as a community here at the school. And then that way we're all speaking the same thing. I think the pivot for me was, though, I got out of that traditional way of thinking of saying, create that space where I'm hoping parents are going to come in and share. Because with today's parents, they're not, and particularly if you're serving the voiceless like I serve, or, impoverished families, they're not going to come in because of their traumas that's associated with schools. So we have to create those safe spaces and those safe havens where we're saying, hey, we're seeking this information, not to use it against you. We're not using it against you. We're not going after truancy. We're not doing all those negative connotations that come along with getting to know you. But we truly want to know who you are, how you think, what you identify with, so that we can align ourselves to it.
That alignment is extremely important. I'm going to ask Bishop to come in for a second, because Charlotte mentioned something, and y'all have heard Charlotte say this before, that she likes to go suited and booted. And oftentimes when Charlotte shows up to the school, the PTA and the school board, there's somebody like Aaron Bishop, who's also sitting in the room, who is helping community pivot, because sometimes we lead ourselves, we lead teams, we lead organizations, but we also lead communities. And sometimes we have to figure out how to make movements happen. And Bishop, what does that look like from your perspective as a person who is sitting there on the school board, hearing these parents and educators and administrators voice their concerns?
Well, for 15 years, I've served as an advocate for public education, as a public school system board member, served as the chairman of Richmond County School District 1. And I've always had to ask this one question, which is the story of the Messiah tribe. The Messiah tribe doesn't say hello, how you doing when they greet and meet each other. They always ask the question, how are the children? And the response has to be, all the children are well. And if you don't use the word all, then it sounds an alarm that something is wrong in the village. And so when we look at the responsibility of restoring the village as leaders in education, we have to ask the question, how are the children? Maybe just like what was stated earlier, our children have the wrong mindset because we've shaped their mindset to be a fixed mindset. You can't do this. You can't do that. Maybe we need to ask the question, what can the child do? See, one of my mentors told me a long time ago, are you for the kids or are you kidding? Meaning, are you there to do the job? Or are you just there for the popularity and exposure? I'm saying this today. Are you for the children or are you childish? As an adult, we have to be in the space of adulting to have those courageous conversations between parent, teacher, and child, and trying to figure out how do we unfold or unlock the ability and the destiny of the child by asking the question, how is the child? Yes, it is a village, right? But it takes a village to raise a child. The question we must ask is, who's raising the village?
I like that. So before we go into break, I would like to get each of you to say, because as parents are thinking and watching, what can they do? In an ideal world, if each of you could see and say, how are the children? In an ideal world, what would we like to see our children either being or becoming or displaying when they show up every day? Charlotte, how are the children?
I would like to see that the children are thriving and not just surviving, because a lot of children are in survival mode, whatever their circumstance might be. But I don't want to know that the children are just surviving. I want to know if they're thriving. And so, just like the bishop talks about, how are all the children? I think that's really a great question, because when you know that somebody's not doing well, if one of the children aren't doing well, then that has a really major impact on the community. And so, like I said, I want to know that the children are thriving and not just surviving.
Absolutely. Katrina?
I think for me, I want to see resilience and I want to see growth. And when I say growth, I know that growth happens in our outside of our comfort areas. And so I need to see that what is happening that allows students to grow outside of their comfort area.
Stacy?
I want to see the children emotionally balanced. I want to see that they're able to self-regulate their emotions, talk about their emotions, because emotions drive the way you think. And it has to be controlled in order for you to be able to critically think. So just being connected to their emotional beings is what I would like to see for our students.
Thank you all for sharing that. When we come back after the break, I want to dive in and carry on that conversation just a little bit more. But from an adult perspective, we're going through a lot in our country. And I think that the next two people we're going to talk to will be able to shed some light on how do you pivot both in life and in your career. We'll be back in a moment after the break.
We begin tonight with the people who are really running the country right now.
Now, Trump is often wrong and misleading about a lot of things, but especially about history.
Donald Trump falling in line with President Elon Musk.
In the wake of the unsettling news that MSNBC has canceled Joy Ann Reid's primetime show, The Readout, Roland Martin and the Black Star Network would like to extend an invitation to all of the fans of Joy Ann Reid's MSNBC show to join us every night to watch Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming on the Black Star Network for news, discussion of the issues that matter to you, and the latest updates on the twice impeached, criminally convicted felon-in-chief Donald Trump and his unprecedented assault on democracy, as well as co-president Elon Musk's takeover of the federal government. The Black Star Network stands with Joy Ann Reid and all folks who understand the power of Black voices in media. We must come together and never forget that information is power. Be sure to watch Roland Martin Unfiltered weeknights, 6 p.m. Eastern at youtube.com/Roland S. Martin or download the Black Star Network app.
Welcome back, everybody, to A Balanced Life. And we have asked the question, how are the children? But I want to talk to Deborah Bell and Dr. Tierney about how the grown folks doing. Oh my God, if there was ever a time that we needed to check on each other, I would say this is the season in which we begin to do that. Dr. Tierney, we just heard them tell us that we need to be thriving, we need to be growing, we need to be resilient, and we need to be developing. But at the same time, we want that for our kids. I want that for our grown folks. And somewhere along the way, we have lost our compass, our directionality, and we're stuck. We're not pivoting. We're just kind of like in the muck, in the mire. Share with us, Dr. Tierney, what it looks like to determine when to pivot, how to pivot. Dang, what is a pivot?
Yeah. So to answer your first question, we know how the kids are. How are the grown folks? Tired, overwhelmed, frustrated, stressed, distracted, hopeful, hoping that things will turn around. And so when you say, like, what is a pivot is just that. It's just a turn. It's just a turn. If you're dancing, it's just where you turn on one foot. If you're in your car, it's just where you turn around, And so when we're thinking about a pivot, I don't want us to overcomplicate it, because a lot of times that's what we'll do. We'll make it really complicated. Like, oh, how do I? No, it's sugar. We just turning. We just turning and going in a different direction. And so when we're thinking about the pivot or how to pivot, I think the first thing we have to do is prepare for the pivot. Start thinking about what you want to see different. What do you want to do different? How do you want to be different? How do you want to feel, different? And then once you start to identify, okay, this is what's working, this is what's not working, then let's start preparing for that pivot. What needs to happen today, tomorrow, next week, next month, because again, we're saying pivot. We're not saying like sharp turn. We're not saying swerve. We're just saying just a turn. So this doesn't have to be anything that's adding more stress or adding more, overwhelm or anything like that. You don't have to do everything in one day. It's just you taking a second to really think about what it is that you want to see, and then preparing yourself, your mind, your family, your heart, your finances to make that turn.
Making a turn. Deborah Bell. Everybody, welcome, our special guest, Deborah Bell, John Maxwell coach, leader extraordinaire. I've known Deborah for, we're not going to talk about it and date ourselves, but, it's like 3 decades now, probably. Pink slips, being removed from the federal government, you're having to pivot in your career. Some people are going to make it, and some people just don't know what the heck to do. So Deborah, talk to us about how do you lead yourself and define what your next can look like if you've been caught in this, I don't even know what to call it. If you've been caught up in this hurricane of change, and what do you do and how do you land?
So many people right now have been caught in what you describe as a hurricane, but also can be described as a disruption in comfort zone, disruption in business as usual. So whenever we're facing these kinds of disruptions, I like to think about a pivot as a purposeful shift in direction. It gives us an opportunity to not just look at things the way they've always been, no matter what the disruption and how life is life and how that has occurred. This opportunity, and we don't often see it as opportunity. We look at the negative thing that's impacted us first. But when you can see it as opportunity, then you have to stop and assess, what do I need or want next? And I think that's a very important question when you're experiencing disruption, because often the disruption does not come from within a lot of times. Sometimes it may, but what we're experiencing now definitely has not come from within, and it's from without, but it still presents an opportunity for us to assess what should be next. What can my next look like? And when you begin to ask those kinds of questions, then it begins to fill your mind and your space with opportunities and options. Because initially, with a disruption, with a storm, we don't always first see the opportunity that's before us. So I think it's important that as we're moving in the space that we're in, to just think about, what could this next really look like for me? What do I already have? Because when we talk about pivot, it's not about starting over. It's about realigning what you already have with the purpose that you have. It's including all of the learning, all of the work experience and expertise that you have. What can you do with that now? So the pivot should also include in assessing, what do I have in my hand? What do I have that can propel me forward in this current situation? And I think all of those things should come into play and are very important in making sure that you pivot well. Again, a pivot is not about failure. It is not about starting over. It is understanding where you are and taking what you have to move yourself forward.
I want to ask Dr. Tierney a follow up to something that you said. Most of us don't live with our ducks in a row. So we don't even know what our access point is. Like, what is in my hand? Because this job is all I've known. This career is all I've had. This is what I've always done. Renaissance men and women don't exist as much as they used to. People aren't ready, Dr. Tierney. I know you talk about this some in your book, Level Up, and then your 30-day goal getting plan. But a part of that is people don't even know themselves anymore because they became their job. They became their career. How now does the individual extrapolate themselves from what used to be to see that I can also do something new?
Yeah. Let me just say what Deborah just said is spot on. Okay. And in order to be able to do some of the things what Deborah just said, the sugar, when a pivot is upon us, we cannot panic. Let me say that one more time. When the pivot is upon us, we cannot panic. You can't see what you got if you are running in a panic. You know, when things are seemingly burning down and, you know, the bottom is falling out. And, you know, typically what we do is we panic. And like you said, Dr. J, that's all we've known. If the only thing we've known has been this job or this city or this neighborhood or whatever this thing is, then when that thing is shaken, we typically go into a panic. And when we are in a panic, we can't think straight. We can't see things for what they really are. We won't be able to spot the opportunity, and now if you add into that, if our ducks have already been quacking all over the place, and that one duck that you think is a duck, but it's really a chicken, is somewhere running around too, then you're all the more going to be even more stressed out, even more in an upheaval and in a topsy-turvy. So the first thing I always suggest is just to stay calm. Breathe. This is a perfect opportunity to connect with your higher power. Go talk to Jesus. Go have a whole conversation with him. The second thing to do is, this is a perfect time to, if don't have a therapist, don't have a coach, get you one. Because having that outside perspective that can give you some perspective on what you're feeling, that can give you some perspective on your circumstances and help you spot the opportunity, can save you a whole lot of time. Okay. My clients that come and talk to me when they are in a pivot, they don't have to go the 2, 3, 5 years that I had to go when my life burned down, and the job that I had, my good job that I had, all of a sudden was just ripped from up under me, and I didn't know what I was going to do. You know who came and saved me? Dr. Jacquie. She's the one that came and looked me eyeball to eyeball and said, girl, why are you waiting on them to give you a job? You got all that talent, all them degrees, create your own job. And that's what then clicked the light bulb for me to then pivot, but when we isolate ourselves and we get in this panic, panic space, and we get over here in this corner, we can't see the opportunities. We can't see what's really ahead of us. We haven't invited anyone in to help us. We're not talking to Jesus. We're not calm. So it's going to be really, really hard for us to really get our ducks back in a row and find that one duck that's really a chicken. Okay. So don't panic. Go talk to Jesus, and then let's get connected with a coach or a therapist. You got a whole bunch of coaches right here on this one episode alone. Any of us, I'm just going to speak for everybody on here. Call any of us, and we can help you pivot. So you're doing things that absolutely don't work.
So how important, Deborah, is intention and purpose? Because some people just, well, I'm going to try this. I'm going to run over here and do that because it looked good, or somebody said they thought they'd be good at it. But oh, Lord, help the people, Deb. Help the people.
You know what? You bring up something that's so vital in creating change in your life. You have to move with intentionality and around purpose. Purpose is going to help you line up with what is truly important in your life and what you really enjoy doing and what you're really good at. Often purpose is that thing that it's what you do just because you do, and you do it well. It is also that thing that other people identify often before you do. But you have to begin with the assessment. I am so glad that the issue of don't panic came up. You have to begin to sit and assess, and often you cannot do that on your own. You need support and the help from trained individuals who can guide and direct you, who can hear what you're saying and help you begin to process and think through it in an intentional and purposeful way. So looking at just being intentional, recognize the signs of when a pivot is necessary. Often you'll have this feeling of feeling stuck and unfulfilled. It may come as just this little nudge that there's more. And then it could be looking at the thing that you have been doing, even if it's snatched away, or if you have this feeling of, man, I'm really tired of doing this. Take time to pause and reflect, because you got to move with power and purpose. Pause to reflect. What is God trying to reveal in this season? What is it? Reframe the narrative. Don't look at just the negative thing. This happened. This was snatched away from me. Could it be a divine redirection?
Mm-hmm.
Own your story. Everything you've been through is preparation for where you're going. Everything.
Mm-hmm.
Take bold action. Small steps unblock bigger breakthroughs. So incremental steps can help create the change. When you're facing this type of pivot where it's not what you want, it was brought on suddenly, then don't panic, step back, take a step back and assess what could be, what could come from this. And if you need some help, get some help because help is available. And sometimes it'll take courage, it'll take creativity, it'll take you moving beyond your comfort zone and what is normal for you to begin to think about doing something different. But being intentional, write down where you want to go, the thoughts that are coming, write it down, begin to journal, and then pay attention to the people God is bringing across your path. Pay attention to the things that are happening now, because they may be cues or clues to where you need to focus your next movement and your next set of activity. Tap into your community. Who do you already know? Yes, we're all here and you can easily contact any of us, but there are also people in your community who can help you to assess being intentional and purposeful in this next move in your life. Know that this did not take God by surprise by any measure. So spend some time, if you're a person of faith, checking in with God to see, okay, so this happened. It wasn't a surprise to you. So what should my next step be? And then listen and pay attention to what happens next, to what things come to mind, to what doors begin to open as you move forward, as you think about what could this really be for me?
Absolutely. I think that those are great tips. I tell y'all every week, get your pen, your pad, and your digital device, because these are going to be the days that you get the tips that you need to put in your balanced living toolkit. When we come back after the break, I want to tap into two people who have resources and knowledge that are able to move your life forward. I know some of y'all didn't want to go back into the office. You don't like the people who sit in the cubicle next to you. You're already having these water cooler and parking lot conversations. But when we come back after the break, we'll dive right into what it looks like to be in a safe place for such a time as this. We'll be back in a moment after the break.
Hello, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase. Listen to what I'm about to tell you. The window to invest in Fanbase is closing. We've raised over $10.6 million of our $17 million goal. That means there's room for less than 6,370 people to invest in Fanbase for the average amount. The minimum to invest in Fanbase right now is $399. That makes you an owner in Fanbase today. Go to startengine.com/fanbase to invest. Why? Because current social apps have taken advantage of users for far too long, with content suppression, shadow banning, harmful racist content, and no real tools for monetization and equity. Fanbase has over 1.4 million users and counting, allowing anyone to reach all their following and monetize their content from day one. Social media is the new TV, and whoever owns the apps that distribute that content have the opportunity to own potential billion-dollar companies. While big platforms with uncertain futures are failing to serve their users, Fanbase is stepping up to fill the gap. Don't wait until it's too late. Invest now, invest for yourself and your future. Go to startengine.com/fanbase and own the next generation of social media.
Welcome back, everybody, to A Balanced Life. And as you've already heard, we've got things for your toolkit to help you discover how to pivot. And in today's time and culture, we have moved sort of swiftly already into 2025, dealing with crisis and conflict that often require us to, yes, pull ourselves up, figure out how to go to what we need to get to so that we can be our best selves in the places where we find ourselves. Aaron Bishop, as well as Stacey Owens, both have books that intrigue me. Bishop's book on For Such a Time as This, as well as Stacey Owens on creating safe spaces for employees, as well as building an empire from ground zero are two people that I believe that we should be talking to, because some of you are going to have to start your next from scratch. Hey, y'all.
Hey.
Can you imagine starting your next from scratch? I mean, that is a pivot within itself. And oftentimes people don't know where to get started. People now already know whether or not they're going to stay working in the jobs that they have. Some of them chose to opt out and leave. And they're really, as we just heard, trying to be intentional about what they do next and how do they get there. I'm going to start with Aaron Bishop for a second, because Bishop, what does it look like for people to see themselves through the lens of for such a time as this? Where might they be moving toward, especially if it's a place they've only thought about but never deigned to consider doing?
Well, for such a time as this is really encompassing what we've been talking about this entire show, the pivot, right? And when you look at the pivot, it literally creates a urgency of now. And now is an acronym that is no opportunity wasted. The urgency of no opportunity wasted. When you're making a pivot, you got to understand a pivot is a half spin. And if it's not controlled, it can become a full spin. And what that leads us to understand is sometimes if we're not controlling the pivot for such a time as this, we might find ourselves in a spin cycle. And that spin cycle will cause a dizziness with your destiny. You won't know which way is up. You wouldn't know which way to step forward or move backwards. But you have to control your pivot. In the book, which I have penned, which is called For Such a Time as This, I highlight the fact that Dr. King was at a pivotal moment in the history of our people and our nation. And everyone knows that I Have a Dream speech still rings true today. And he was talking about liberation or finding a path forward, the urgency of now. And he said these words: I feel that we are faced with the fierce urgency of now, that tomorrow is today. What happens when the thing you were expecting to do later or tomorrow is now in your face today? Like it is a now moment where you can't waste the opportunity. You got to learn how to pivot and control it. Because when you understand that there's life and there's a thing called life and life be lifing, you will have to pivot. You will have to adjust. You will have to adapt. And that's what this book is all about. It's about you aligning yourself. It's about you becoming agitated enough to know that you got to do something now. It's about you assessing your group of people that are around you, which you are the average of. You have to understand that for such a time as this, is helping everyone understand that your next is your now. So if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready.
Now that in itself is a word. Stacey, talk to us about that, because you literally built 2 schools from the ground up. You've been in administration and education for quite some time. Did you see yourself doing what you're doing, or was it always a dream? Because this may be now a time for a lot of people saying, I'm gonna pivot right into my dream and I've got all the skills and expertise to do it. Talk to us about it.
I absolutely did not see myself as the person who would be creating 2 schools from the ground up. That was actually a charge that was given to me from God, and I was just being obedient in that. However, I think it was aligned to my purpose, because it has always been a dream for me to be an educator. So as early as the 5th grade, I knew that I wanted to teach and help others. I just didn't understand the full capacity. So I think the lesson in that is not limiting yourself to just your dream, because the higher being has, when he put his hands in it, he has the power to take your dream and make it way bigger than what you may be seeing it in as that moment. But will you be able to be flexible enough to go with it? Will you be able to be flexible enough to allow his pivot to take place? So I think we have to be in that space where George Shaw said that you don't have to wait till the right opportunity to do something. Just do it, And so I think that's what led me when I came to that place of starting the schools. I saw that it was a need for my personal son that wasn't happening while he was in school. And when God told me to create that space that didn't exist, fear kicked in at first because I thought, I'm just a little old teacher without a lot of money. But what would have happened if I would have allowed that fear to hold me in that space and not allow me to pivot to the thing that I was told to do because I was surrounded in fear? So I think, at that point I had to step back and I had to think about, all right, what would this look like? And so I would encourage you to always know what you want. When you find yourself in your purpose or you find yourself trying to find your purpose, sit down and really think about, what do you want this to look like? What do you want it to feel like? Can you visualize where you want to go next? And when you are in control of knowing what you want, when you're in that situation where change comes, it will allow you to go there. So I think the biggest lesson that I learned in opening a school from scratch was to be open to anything that's possible, be in control of knowing what I wanted it to look like, and then release all fear that come up and, created those self-limiting thoughts, and learn how to remove those so that I can be able to be that force and just do it.
I want to ask you a follow-up question on that, Stacey, and then I'm going to go to Bishop with the same question. You mentioned self-limiting beliefs and how fear can creep in. And oftentimes the fear comes from people telling us we can't do something or having been taught that we're not good enough. I don't want to ask, what does it look like? And as much as I want to ask, how do people identify in themselves what's creeping in to hold them back? Because we have to do some introspection in order to be able to move forward in alignment, as the word has been mentioned, in a purposeful way. So how do people look within and say, these are my one or two things that I know are holding me back, and I'm going to attack those things and move myself forward?
I think for me, the look within came from what stopped me. Like what developed that? What thought came along that absolutely made me stand still and not move? And so I'll say, for example, I started by saying, hey, God told me to create a school. My first thought was, me? I don't have any money. So I had to evaluate, what are my beliefs that surrounds money? How did I grow up? What was the traumas that I had growing up, when they say that, I didn't grow up with a lot. So did I develop some bad thoughts around how you hold on to money, how you look at money, how does money flow in and out of your hand? But I had to have that conversation with myself about money, because as long as I believed I don't have any money, that made me stop. And the moment I reflected on my beliefs surrounding money, guess what? The money came, but I had to remove the thought of, you can't do this because you don't have any money. I had to say, no, I was taught that I didn't have any money, but every money or every sense of funding that I needed is out there. Can I open myself up to seeing which ways I can tap into the different funding sources that are available? But I first had to remove that self-limiting thought that I had surrounding that I can't do this because of money. I had to release that. So I think whenever a self-limiting thought come up, if it stops you in your track and you get to the point where you're going to put the project down and you're just not going to move, then you need to take that thought and evaluate it a little deeper and see if you have any inner traumas around that or lack of knowledge around it, so that you can go and seek from others how you can change that thought and that belief.
Absolutely. Aaron?
In the previous show, I didn't have this very handsome guy over my shoulder, which way it is right here, right? I had a portrait of Harriet Tubman. And I'm reminded of the Moses of the Promised Land, or the conductor of the railroad, the Underground Railroad, who said these words: I could have freed 1,000 more slaves if they only knew they were slaves. When we look at what Harriet Tubman did so courageously, it was literally just her following the North Star. In life, we all must know what our North Star looks like. Because if not, you may be looking at the wrong star. You may be looking at the wrong destiny or the wrong direction. When I had an opportunity in life to know what my purpose was, what I was destined to do, I followed that North Star, and I didn't let bondage or limited thinking keep me. in that same space. And in life, I've had to go through that many of times because of what I call life cycles. When you go through your own evolution and your life cycles that allows you to become the person you are and evolve to the man you are supposed to be or the woman you can be, you have to look at that North Star and say, that is the way north. Even in the Bible, we look at the children of Israel, that they wandered around for years after years, years after years, until someone say, this is the way north. You may need someone who can coach you up to that, or someone who can look at your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, your threats, and not spell out this SWOT, but spell out the NORTH in your life. Go north, my brothers. Go north, my sisters.
When we come back after the break, I want to open up this conversation and this notion of paralyzed by purpose. And oftentimes people see their purpose, they know where they want to go, they think they do, but they don't know how to get there. But then there's this other notion that oftentimes that we literally have to pivot or perish. And people give us no choice. And so there's this ultimatum that's hanging over our head, which then paralyzes us again. When we come back after the break, let's dive in. We'll be back in a moment.
What's up, y'all? Look, Fanbase is more than a platform. It's a movement to empower creators, offering a unique opportunity for everyday people to invest in Black-owned tech, infrastructure, and help shape the future of social media. Investing in technology is essential for creating long-term wealth and influence in the digital age. The Black community must not only consume tech, we must own it.
Discover how equity crowdfunding can serve as a powerful tool for funding Black businesses, allowing entrepreneurs to raise capital directly through their community through the Jobs Act.
Welcome back, everybody, to A Balanced Life. And we have definitely been talking about what does it mean to pivot, what does it look like, and how do you get there? I want to have a conversation with Dr. Tierney and with Katrina for just a moment about this thought and idea and concept that you can't have both. People literally put us in this space, ladies, where it's like you can have one or you can have the other. But it's like I can be paralyzed while I figure out my purpose. But I also recognize that if I stay in one place too long, I could perish because I stayed there too long. How do we get people in the frame of mind in reference that being balanced is okay? Because some things aren't an either or, it's a both and. Katrina, what does that look like when we're living in the both and space?
So we're going to call that the in-between phase, in between, right? And so while you might be paralyzed, something is gripping you tightly, and it could be physical, emotional, or just mentally. You have to fight. I go back to something Dr. Tierney said about, your higher being, reaching out, having that meditation moment, sitting with it, and realizing that you have to do what you think is impossible. You have to push yourself where you see that you can go. It's about taking action. Even when you don't know what to do, having that forward-thinking mindset that I must take action on what is holding me back. I think when we think about, what do we do in the in-between phase? We sometimes have gotten lax. We get uneasy, and we have to sit with it. We have to find a way to address the things that are holding us back. Whether it's getting a coach, a therapist, someone we trust to talk to, we have to push ourselves beyond our comfort zone to push to what we know we need to do. I think, resilience is a key word that we use, adaptability, shift. There's shift happens. We need to make sure that we're doing the things that will allow us to shift when we become paralyzed with fear.
Dr. Tierney, I know you got a word for us because I've read your books and your tips help me. And Dr. Tierney.
Yeah, yeah. I actually want to reference something that Stacy just said. When she just told us that in order to get over her fear, she had to do some self-perspective analyzation on her childhood traumas around money and her thoughts around money. A lot of times we get into this either or mindset because there's something from our childhood, some thoughts or something that happened that got us into a fixed mindset. Maybe it was you had to pick either you wanted a grape popsicle or orange popsicle. You couldn't have both popsicles. But whatever it was, for some reason we got inundated into this fixed mindset that told us we can only have one. We couldn't have both and so as we grow and as we mature, we hold on to that fixed mindset. But when we're talking about pivoting, when we're talking about purpose and really stepping into what God has for us, our God is a both and God. He is not an either or God. Now there are principles that he outlines for us to follow. We have to be obedient. We have to listen to his directive. But there's not an either or. When I read my Bible, there's not an either or. It's a both and. Or let me say this: there is either you're gonna do what he said, or you're gonna be over here in some trouble. But when we're talking about going after the things that we really want to see accomplished and successfully pivoting, we have to have a nimbleness of mindset, a flexibility of mindset. We have to make sure that we are able to give ourselves the permission to see things in a way that we might not have experienced it, before, to look beyond what is possible, to look at the hills from which cometh our help, to see what else does God have in store for us. And sometimes, a lot of times, because of our upbringing, because of our background, because of the things that we experience, because of the vicarious living we've done through our friends and family, we get locked into this fixed mindset of what could be. And that mindset has no it's not even close to what God has for us, the unlimited nature of all of the possibilities that God has in store for us. So in order for us to really tap into that, we have to get that flexibility of mindset. And that could often mean talking with someone that don't look like you, connecting with people that didn't grow up like you, getting comfortable in places that are typically uncomfortable for you. To get something that you've never had, you got to do something that you've never done. You got to talk to people that you've never talked to before. You got to go places where you've never gone before. So when we're talking about a pivot, we have to make sure we understand that that's an uncomfortable place to be. And we can have the both end, when we can have the amazing life, and we can have that unlimited possibilities and all of that. But you have to make the decision. Am I going to stay here in this fixed place, this fixed mindset, with this either or mindset that was given to me? And am I going to continue to nurse these traumas that I maybe didn't know as a trauma, but it's holding me back? Am I going to keep getting stuck at these stumbling blocks? Or am I going to move past that so that I can really step into the options that are there? And Sugar, I'm not saying this just because, oh, I'm a coach and I got more degrees than a thermometer. And no. I'm saying this to you because I had to do it. I saw myself as one way. I saw myself as the academic. I saw myself as working in higher education for the duration of my career. And I had to face that thing eyeball to eyeball and say, okay, wait, am I going to allow myself to either or that? Or can I be both and? Yes, I still work with schools. Yes, I'm very much an educator, but I'm also all of these other things. So both and is on the other side of you being able to release what you think is possible and step into the impossible.
Let's have a family conversation. Bring everybody in because you two, you have the key. Literally what you just said. We are oftentimes in this space where we are too paralyzed to mobilize. Let's talk for a moment. What does mobilization look like, especially for people who have been in their jobs? Like they were lifers, they were career people. Like I got 30 years, I got 35 years. I'm coming up on a certain age. I'm ready to retire. And all of a sudden, they're cast out into the deep and do not know how to swim because they never had a clue, never had an original thought, never had an idea. Some of y'all, like me, we were pushed into entrepreneurship at some point. Other people are going to be faced with this task of figuring out what to do. I'm going to start with Bishop. And and he hates when I do this, but I'm gonna ask Bishop from a male perspective, because people always say, oh, your show is just women, and I thought y'all were gonna talk about women things. I said, no, we talk about everything. So Bishop, men process differently how to get to their next versus how women go to their crew, their tribe, their village. You know, we got all the people we need on our front row and our second row. But men see things a little different because, like we said before, priest, protector, provider, there's a lot of heaviness on some of them. What does the pivot look like for men?
Well, men need to have a sense of reassurance and security in making that next step. And so a man is a very logical person, right? So when he thinks, he doesn't necessarily always think in a place of faith, but he thinks in a place of functionality. Does it work? And when we look at how men move, you know that many people have been thrown into the deep end of life. Men are going to be thrown in with a floating device in hand. And so there's a man who's always out there saying, well, here's my plan B, right? Because a man is always going to think, I need a plan A, but I'm always going to be thinking, what's my next? And so in life, men are out there really trying to consider how as a priest, a protector, and a provider, do I always stay in this space where I feel secure about what I am a steward of? It's a lot to deal with as a man, which causes a high sense of stress in your life, because at the end of the day, the buck stops here. Yes, we are surrounded by great women who are wives, who are daughters, who are even mothers, who will heal our brokenness because we are embattled by the scars of life. But that man who is a lion in life sometimes need to feel that lamb experience, because we operate in a lion mentality where we're going to attack, we're going to protect, we're going to be the king in the jungle. But when we come home, sometimes we're dealing with just that lamb experience where we need the nurturing of fighting for the future. In life, when we are dealing with this pivot and this opportunity to always think of what's next, the brother, the man in your life is always saying, I got to stay ready. And that spirit of readiness can be fatigue. Many men out here are dealing with readiness fatigue because they always got to stay ready. They can never be caught off guard with the challenges of life. So it can be a lot on us. It can be a lot on us. And sometimes we are silent about that suffering, silent about that struggle. But when we do speak, hopefully there's someone there to listen.
Hopefully there's someone there to listen. Dr. Tierney, paralyzed to mobilize. How do we get there?
I think it goes back to not panicking, making sure that we're not panicking, making sure that we are properly managing our fear, because we're not mobilizing because we're so afraid, we're so insecure, we're allowing those things to go bump in the night to dictate what we do instead of allowing our faith to move us forward. So making sure that you really get a grip on that fear, you really tackle that thing to the ground, again, get some help, in that, because that's the only way we're really going to be able to mobilize.
Absolutely. Deb.
So this was really good because it brought me back to my experience with people who have been let go of jobs. I worked in outplacements for over 15 years. And one of the things that I recognized working with people who have just been notified that they no longer have that 20-year job, that 15-year job that they have built their whole life around. Once people recognize the skill and expertise that they have, it gives them a sense of confidence. So the assessment has to take place for people to now look at, what do I have? Yes, the immediacy of the disruption, it may cause panic, but the key is taking time to reflect on what you really do have. Sometimes that may mean a shift in identity, understanding who you are, because the identity was associated with the job. And then a refocus on what is my true purpose. And then rediscovering your voice, understanding who you are and what you really have, what you've been through, all of those things come into play as you push yourself forward. In fact, the confidence that you find in those things will help you propel yourself forward.
Absolutely. Stacy.
I was thinking from the perspective of, if you keep your gifts and talents, things that you like doing, things that you're skilled at, like she just said, in the forefront, that'll keep you passionate about what you want to do. And then you align that to these global shifts and these changes that's going on in the world around you, that'll keep you mobilized. So I think when you start thinking you got to start over or something new, or you forget who you are and what you bring to the table, it'll make you think that you got to stand still. So, for instance, I'll say for me, when I opened my high school, in my mind, I thought it was going to have, 100 kids, thousands of kids flowing in. And it ended up the first year with just 20 kids. And I thought, oh, should I panic? What should I do? I just aligned myself to the new changes that's going on right now with micro schooling. And I say, you know what? We have a micro school. And I just shifted to let me learn more about micro schools, and let's run that for the time being. So I think it just bring your talents and align it to whatever shifts that's going on. It'll help you from stopping and becoming paralyzed.
Absolutely. Katrina.
As someone who has just recently gone through being paralyzed and finishing my stint in education, those first few months are crucial, and you need to spend some time doing self-reflection, self-assessment, loving yourself, taking some self-care time, going back and journaling about your purpose, having a relationship with him, and having a conversation and sitting still to make sure that you are hearing from him, that you know what he would want you to do next. I think for me, Nike has a slogan that says, just do it. You have to first, before you just do it, make sure that it's in the will of God and that's what he has called you to do next. And then launch out on faith and just do it.
All right, folks, I hope that you have had your pen, your pad, your digital device out, and you have taken the time to write down some of these things, because they could be your next launching point for your next. When we're back, I'll give my reflection.
Hello, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase. Listen to what I'm about to tell you. The window to invest in Fanbase is closing. We've raised over $10.6 million of our $17 million goal. That means there's room for less than 6,370 people to invest in Fanbase for the average amount. The minimum to invest in Fanbase right now is $399. That makes you an owner in Fanbase today. Go to startengine.com/fanbase to invest. Why? Because current social apps have taken advantage of users for far too long, with content suppression, shadow banning, harmful racist content, and no real tools for monetization and equity. Fanbase has over 1.4 million users and counting, allowing anyone to reach all their following and monetize their content from day one. Social media is the new TV, and whoever owns the apps that distribute that content have the opportunity to own potential billion-dollar companies. While big platforms with uncertain futures are failing to serve their users, Fanbase is stepping up to fill the gap. Don't wait until it's too late. Invest now, invest for yourself and your future. Go to startengine.com/fanbase and own the next generation of social media.
Welcome back, everybody. And today, my reflection is simple. Don't be paralyzed by fear. Allow yourself to take the time that is needed to not only look inside of yourself to see what you have, but also engage in meaningful conversations with people that are in your circle. In these times, we cannot go it alone. Yeah, I know many of you have been accustomed to working in a silo, trying to figure out how you should do it. How's that been working out for you? So talk to some people. Figure out what it is you want to do, write it down, and then allow yourself to take it day by day and step by step. It is in these times that you can discover not only do you have the financial resources, but you also have the applause of people that have been rooting for you all along. This is the power in pivoting. Bye now.